Gives me great pleasure to hand the meeting over to Murph from San Francisco, who will be sharing around 50 to 55 minutes on the topic of the steps, the stairway to heaven. Murph.
Okay. My name is Murph and I'm an alcoholic. It's a pleasure to be here. I absolutely love UK meetings. I love the welcoming aspect to your meetings, how you welcome everybody that comes in here and you make people feel comfortable. I felt comfortable the first UK meeting that I ever went to, and I continue to go to UK meetings. So I'm an alcoholic, which means that I can never safely drink again, no matter what. There can be no reservations, no thoughts, no, if I hit the lottery, maybe I can drink normally again, or, if I get a job with making more money, or if I get, the family back, or if I get this, or if I get that, maybe I can drink again. If you're an alcoholic and you cross that line, there's no way to drink safely again, ever. We do this thing one day at a time, but I can never drink safely again. I can never use safely again. And I have alcoholism. And alcoholism is a mind-powered disease. It's a thinking disease. It's a disease of wrong thinking and bad perceptions, which was usually caused by some sort of an emotional trauma, which is different for each and every one of us. But each and every one of us at some point in our lives had this emotional trauma. And it can be something from a single event. It can be something like the death of a loved one, loss of a job. There's so many different things, but even if two people have the same experience, they feel differently about it. So I can never judge anyone on why they're here and what got them here, only that they are here, and they probably felt the same way I did when they got here. And the other thing can be an ongoing thing, a thing like racism, a thing like bullying, something like that caused that trauma. But what that trauma causes us to do is it wakes up that ego that's in us all, and the book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that our egos have to be smashed. And this trauma wakes up the ego. The ego creates this false self, and that's that self that I have that talks to me constantly. And it's funny because you'll see a person walking down the street and they'll be talking to themselves out loud, and a lot of time we'll say, wow, that person's crazy. And yet I'll walk down the street and have the same thoughts going through my head, but I won't verbalize them, right? So I think that's inherently in each and every one of us alcoholics is we have this self-talking mind, this mind that tells us negative things. And it's so crazy that we so readily accept the negative and dismiss the positive. We can sit there and understand and say, oh yeah, I so relate to that. I so relate to that. But when I tell people that Murph is happy 95% of the time, oh, there's no way. There's no possible way you can be happy 95% of the time. And that is a fact, that Murph is happy 95% of the time. And it wasn't always that way sober. Or I take that back. It wasn't always that way without a drink. We use the word sober a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, but was I really sober? And the answer was no, because the original definition back in 1939, when the book came out, was sober was soundness of mind. That was the definition. It had nothing to do with alcoholism, right? It had nothing to do with being an alcoholic. So sober means for me is that I'm not drinking and I have a peace of mind, that I'm happy, joyous, and free. Now I can be dry also, right? And that just means going through the motions and not drinking. And my experience is that people who aren't alcoholics that stop drinking, their lives get better. Real alcoholics, when they stop drinking, their lives get worse. You see, my trouble was never drinking. My trouble was sober. Whenever I was sober, that's when I had my difficulties. And it all comes from this mind that that ego created. Um, and, you know, your thoughts have such incredible power. Um, and I'll talk about this a little later when I get into the steps, but, um, you know, that fear that we all share, that that corroding thread, they call it, that weaves its way through each and every one of our lives, um, that we create within our own minds, is a lie. It's not the truth. There's no fear that you have that isn't an illusion, that isn't a lie. And although it seems so true to you and it seems so real, that when I get through, I hope that you will understand a way that you can get through fears, and how, you can see them for what they really are, and just destroy them with God's help. And so, I always talk about this because it's such a huge part of my sobriety, and that's the emotional trauma that I went through as a child. And I'll just go through this really quickly. It was, there was a knock at the door when I was right around 10 or 11 years old, and I followed my mom to the door, and she opened the door, and my big brother was standing there at the doorway, and he had his 3-week-old baby in his arms, and he was bigger than life to me. And he looked at my mother and he said, "You take this child. I don't want her. Um, if you don't take her, I'm giving her away." And alcoholism and heroin addiction took him to a place where he didn't want his own child. That's how far that we can go in this disease. And we were to take my niece. My mom was to take her, and she would become my sister. We would adopt her. She would become my sister. I wouldn't see my brother again. And I went from being the baby of the family to the middle child. Um, I went from all the attention to no attention. And that was my perception. That's the way I saw it. And I couldn't understand it. And at the same time, my father got his dream job. He bought a bar in San Francisco on the waterfront, and he became absent in my life. My grandfather played professional baseball for the Yankees and the Cubs. My father played professional American football, and I never had a ball thrown to me. Um, I became an angry, angry kid. I felt abandoned. I felt unloved. My mother, God bless her, just a beautiful woman, you know, who is now raising a 3-week-old baby at 46 years old. And she had to deal with my sister who had problems of her own. And so I didn't see that helping me with my homework, you know, in school anymore. She couldn't make it to my games anymore. Uh, you know, and so I just got this idea that I played over and over and over in my head, and we create these negative pathways. And as I create this, as this incessant talk about me not being unloved, and me being abandoned gets played over and over, it starts to become my truth. And I believe that, and I walk through life with that belief, and that's a terrible thing for a child. Um, I think one of the most important things that a child needs is his father or her father's protection, and I never felt protected. And so, um, when I when as life went on, and I took that first drink at this party, or the second drink, whichever one it was, all of a sudden that chatter stopped. All of a sudden there were no thoughts of me being unloved. There were no thoughts of me being abandoned. There were no thoughts of me being ugly, of no one likes me. You know, she'll never say yes to me if I ask her to dance. No thoughts of that. Um, Alcohol quieted my mind. And it was the greatest feeling ever because I was able to enjoy myself for the first time. I was able to be at that party with everybody dancing. And she did say yes to me. The girl that I never thought would say yes to me, one of the lies that I was telling myself, she did say yes to me. And we danced and we laughed and I got drunk and I got sick. And it was the greatest thing ever. It was just awesome. And I would chase that and chase that and chase that throughout my life. I became a bartender. I bartended at some really popular night spots. I made a lot of money. I was doing really well. I loved the bar life. Every girlfriend that I ever had was either a cocktail waitress or a bartender herself. Every vacation I ever went on was planned around going to the best bars. It wasn't going to the beach. It wasn't going, to see the sights. It was where's the best bar in this area that we can go to, and that was my life, and and it worked until it stopped working. And what I mean by that is that no matter how much I drank, I could no longer shut this off anymore. Um, Welcome to the new people here. Welcome to the people that are back. There were so many people that said they were back off of a relapse. I want to make sure that I get this point across to the people who have relapsed. I want you to really understand this. I do not relapse because I stopped going to meetings. I do not relapse because I don't have a sponsor. I do not relapse because I don't have commitments. I do not relapse because there was a death in the family. I do not relapse because I lost my job. I relapse because I failed to grow spiritually. And that is the reason why I relapse. There's a promise on page 100. It's the most beautiful promise in the book as far as I'm concerned. And the promise is, if you follow the dictates of a higher power, you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. That means that the closer that I am, the closer I'm connected with that power, no matter what is going on in my life, I can be okay. And that's the heaven I'm talking about. That's the stairway to heaven that the steps provide me. They provide me a place where no matter what happens in my life, I can be okay. The greatest place that you can possibly be in this moment. Okay. And so I get to Alcoholics Anonymous. It happened in two instances. The first one was that my mother and that 3-week-old baby, who is now a grown woman, was with my sister, and they did their form of an intervention on me. I was passed out in the living room of my mom's house. She would always take me back, no matter what happened, no matter what I did, and I was there freeloading again, and I woke up to them standing over me, and they said, either you get help or you get out. Um, and I just looked at them, and in my mind, being abandoned by my father and my brother, now my mother and my sisters were abandoning me. That was my perception of what was happening. I couldn't see my part in this. I couldn't see that I was killing my mom, her drunken son, watching him, his life just deteriorate before her very eyes. And she did the hardest thing any mother could ever have to do, and that's to tell her son that he had to go. But one thing I do know for sure, and this is for all the single parents out there, is that if you have a loved one that's doing this, that's in their alcoholism, if my mother hadn't given me away, she would have never got me back. And I would have continued to use her. And so I would leave for a year. I would tell them some very nasty things, my sisters and my mom. I would be out for another year until I was with the last friend that I had. And he looked at me and he said, they said, him and his wife said, either you get help or you get out. I was living on the living room floor of their place. And I would go to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't remember much from the first couple meetings. I do remember that about a weekend, they said that you're the coffee maker, and I was appalled that they thought that I deserved such a low position, you know, as the coffee maker in a meeting. And it was a way for me to get to start getting to know people. If you know me at all, you know I'm an extroverted person, right? So it's usually not very difficult for me to. It never was very difficult for me to make friends. And so I started to get to know people, and I went to meetings with some very well-intentioned people. I went to meetings where these people really loved, you know, each other in the room. And but the one thing that they did was they said things like meeting makers make it. Commitments will keep you sober. Get a sponsor. Your sponsor will keep you sober. And that wasn't my experience. Even though all those things are so important and vital to the new person, you know, getting that sponsor, finding a home group, going to as many meetings as you can, having commitments at those meetings, those things will not keep you sober. There's only one thing that will keep me sober, and that is a relationship with a power greater than myself. Meeting makers make it to meetings. That's what a meeting maker does. But they're not going to keep me sober. If that's all I'm doing, I am destined to drink again. So I did that though, and I got the curse of AA. And the curse of AA is when you get everything that you think you need to be happy. Because all of us, I don't care. I have never talked to an alcoholic that didn't know when they were first coming back off a relapse or first getting to AA, that after a few weeks knew exactly what they needed to be happy, right? And so I got everything. I got out of the place that I was living. I got my own place. I got a union job. First time I'd ever had a job that wasn't bartending. I started to make really good money. I bought a new car. I had never even had a car registered in my name. I used to buy cars for like 400 American dollars and drive them until the registration was up. And then I'd leave them on the side of the highway and I'd go find a new car, but I would never register them in my own name. And I had a new car now. I got a girlfriend. And my sponsor, this is terrible, but my sponsor used to say, if you're an untreated alcoholic, a new person, and you're looking to date another untreated alcoholic, you're fishing in a toxic lake. that your catch is not going to be what you want. And but I got everything. Those were all the things that I thought I needed to be happy. And yet I wasn't. I would get home and I would feel empty. I would be excited for a moment, but then I'd feel empty. And then I'd have to search for the next thing. And I'd have to search for the next thing. And I have to search for the next thing. And I didn't understand that this program has to be worked from the inside out, not from the outside in. Because it doesn't matter what you get back. You can get your children back. You can get your wife back or husband back. You can get all those back. But if you get them back with the same mind, you're destined to do the same exact thing over again. If I'm the same person and I get these things back, I'm going to do the same things over again. Whatever it was that I was doing to lose the wife or the husband, whatever I was doing to lose the job, I'm going to continue to do those things. And I found out, it's one of my favorite quotes. I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous that God can bring you joy without things, but things without God will never bring me joy. I need that power in my life to be happy and okay with the things that I have, because in and of myself, I have this unsatisfiable mind when untreated, right? And and things wear off. And like I said, I'm happy for a time and then I become empty. And so after 2 years, I drank again. And I literally convinced myself that this time would be different. I literally convinced myself that I've got this thing now. I know what my problem is. I'm selfish. So I'm going to go out there, drink, and I'm going to be a giving person, and I'm going to do volunteer work, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And I convinced myself it would be different this time. And it was different. It really was. It was worse. Right? That relapse was worse than anything that I did to get me here. I came back after 2 years on a suicide attempt. I was put into a rehab, a 30-day rehab out here. It was it's a glimmer of hope for the people at this meeting, that a guy that had a suicide attempt is now happy 95% of the time. Just think of that statement as we go on. And so I went to this rehab. I was there for 30 days, like I said. I came out of the relapse. I had never done the steps the first time around. You know, the steps enable me to find that power greater than myself that will solve my problem, that thinking and perception problem. And I never did it. So I never solved that thinking and perception problem. I continued to think the same way that I was thinking all along. Those same thoughts came back, that no one loves me, no one likes me, that I'm abandoned, that you're going to leave me. You know, and it wasn't until the fourth step that would come a little bit later on. I would end up working the steps a few times over the next 8 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got some relief every time, but there was something that I was doing that I didn't even know I was doing. Again, well-intentioned people taking me through the steps. And that was that the way I went through the steps with these people was just reading the book with them, but never answering the questions that were asked of me or directed me in the book. There's many, many questions that are directed me in the book, never answering those questions, never actually seeking and searching out a God in that second step that was comfortable for me, never really understanding what it meant to turn my will and my life over to the care of this God. And so that every time I came into the fourth step, and it came to my father and my brother, in my mind, going in on my will, I was never going to forgive them, ever. I hated both of them with every fiber in me, and I was never gonna not hate them. And so I worked the steps this time. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps, but I didn't get relief. If you're somebody that's sitting at this meeting right now, and you're anything like me, where people say, "How you doing, Murph?" And I say, "I'm wonderful. Things are fantastic." And that's not the way you really feel, I understand. I couldn't tell you how I felt. I couldn't let you see what was going on with me. I was so worried about what you thought of me, which is another characteristic of us alcoholics. We care so much about what people think of us. I cared so much that I couldn't let you know that I was hurting. I couldn't let you know that I was in pain. I would have this front of being the happiest guy in the world, and then I'd go home and I'd hate life. I'd hate myself, and that's a terrible way to live. You know, we have this terminal uniqueness where no one will ever understand what I'm going through. You could never understand, and yet there's always someone within these rooms that absolutely understands what you're going through, that's been through something similar to what you're going through. Ask them. If for no other reason than to understand that by you asking me, you're helping me. You're allowing me to be of service to you. And that's where the greatest joy comes from in Alcoholics Anonymous, is the service to other people. is helping another alcoholic, is walking someone through the steps. And so I would go through the steps a few times, and I get to this place. This is before I well, this is kind of going ahead, but I do this anyway because this is one of the most powerful things that ever happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, so I was at home and I got a call from that 3-week-old baby, my adopted sister, and she had 3 children of her own. And she said, "I'm looking for my father. I'm looking for your brother." And she was looking for him because she wanted to find out his medical background for her children. She wanted to see if she had something that she needed to be aware of, and maybe there was something else, down inside her that she never told me. But I told her I don't care, but whatever you're whatever. Um, about 3 weeks to a month later, I get this call from her again, and she said, "I found my father. I found your brother." And he was in the 17th year of a life sentence in prison in Florida. And she told me he wants to write you. And I said, I don't care. Like I said, I hated him. I was never able to release that resentment. And I would get this letter about a month later. And I remember when it came, and I remember looking at the address, the prison in Florida, and I couldn't open the letter. I just sat there staring at it. I sat there staring at it for days. And when I finally opened the letter, it said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong to not be your big brother. And I was wrong to leave you with your father." And he said a few more wrongs. And he said, "Is there anything I can do to make this right?" And that sounded really familiar. And it turned out for 16 of the 17 years in prison, he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that he actually facilitated the meetings within the prison. And I wrote him a nasty letter back. And he wrote me another letter. And he said, "I didn't do this for you. I did this for me. And I thank God that you were brought into my life because today I feel freer than I've ever felt before." What a ninth step. What an amends. That gave this man a feeling of freedom locked behind bars. He was free behind bars because of that amends he was able to make to me. He would go on to say that alcoholism is a prison that unlocks from the inside. How beautiful that is. My brother passed away a little while ago. 47 years in prison, 46 of them sober. He had become the most spiritual man in my life. I miss my brother so much. But Alcoholics Anonymous is where we mend relationships with family, with friends, with work. And that if I work these steps and I do everything that's directed me, I can be a free man. But I went on, worked the steps, held on to that resentment against my father, and after 8 years, I drank again. And I came back 2 years later again. And it was different this time. It was even worse. It was awful. It ended up the same exact way where I didn't want to live. I was 5150. I don't know if they call it 5150 in England, but that means like the psych ward. I was put into the psych ward. I was held there. I went into the hospital right afterwards. I was really, really sick. I was in the hospital for 39 days and I walked out of that hospital. And after 39 days, and I walked down this hill that goes from the hospital to the main street where I get the bus to go home. And right when I got to the bottom of the hill, after all I had been through, after the 2 years out there, after the psych ward, after being in the hospital, my first thought was, I know there's a bar 1 block to the left. That's how powerful this mind is. That's how powerful alcoholism is. But right as I was thinking that, this bus rolled up in front of me and the doors opened right up, right in front of me. And I had this 10 seconds to make a decision. And the decision was to walk onto that bus. Now I'll get into this portion of the steps. 15 years later, here I am. I'll say it'll be 16 in a couple of weeks. And I say it'll be 16 in a couple of weeks because I am a treated alcoholic. I treat myself every day. I'm positive I will not have a drink. And I can truly say that. I am a recovered alcoholic. So I got back and I knew I needed relief right away. And the funny thing is when that bus let me off, it was 7:58. And I looked across the street and there was that gaudy, ugly pink church that sat across the street. And I knew there was a meeting that was going to start in 2 minutes. And I walked across the street instead of walking home, and I walked into that meeting. And that began this 15-year journey. I worked the steps right away. I got some relief, but it was the same old Murph and the same old thing. If you're doing the same things that didn't work, that set aside prayer is perfect, right? I didn't understand it at the time, but I would understand it 3 years later when I walked into a meeting in San Francisco, and I had since moved up the peninsula. I hadn't been to a meeting in San Francisco in years. What drove me there? I can tell you what drove me there. I know what drove me there. A power, right? And I went there and I heard this man share, and he shared in a way I'd never heard anyone share before. And after the meeting, I walked up to him and I said, I'm dying in Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you help me, please? And he said, it will be my honor to help you. And I went over to his place and I told him my story. He told me his story. He said, yep, you're a real alcoholic. We sat down and he would ask me the most important question that was ever asked of me in Alcoholics Anonymous. He looked me square in the eye and he said, are you ready to stop working Murph's Anonymous? And it was like getting hit in the gut with a punch. Because in that moment, I realized I had never worked Alcoholics Anonymous. I had only done the things that I picked and chose to do, expecting the results that are offered me in Alcoholics Anonymous, expecting the promises that are offered to me, believing deep down in my head that I was actually doing AA and I was never doing AA, right? And at that moment, I surrendered. At that moment, I understood what a true surrender was. We went through what this disease is, an allergy of the mind, an allergy of the body, an obsession of the mind. When I put liquor in me, I don't know if I'll ever stop that night. The obsession of the mind is when I'm sober, when I'm without a drink, untreated. The only thing I think about is when that next drink is going to come, or when that next thing You know, it doesn't have to be a drink. It can be, like I was talking about, things outside of myself. It can be anything, right? Anything that I choose to call God. A girlfriend, a car, money, whatever the case may be. And in that moment, every idea that I ever had about Alcoholics Anonymous, any idea that I ever had about Murph, any idea I ever had about running my life evaporated. I was done. I was finished. And what happened was it opened up my mind just enough for the idea of God to come in. And that was enough for a start. My sponsor would tell me that God loves you so much, he won't enter your life without your permission. I had never asked God in. He also told me that you can't sit on the couch watching Netflix expecting God to change your life for you. He explained to me that this power gives you the strength to do these things yourself. You see, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought I had a problem with God. But it wasn't true. I didn't have a problem with God. I never had a God. What I had a problem with was your God. I had a problem with what Chanel told me God was, or Joe told me God was, or Miranda told me God was, or Michael told me God was, or what religion had told me God was. But I had never had my own relationship, my own idea of what God really would be. And my sponsor had me take 2 sheets of paper. One, I wrote everything that God would not be if there was a God. And on the other one, everything that God would be if there was a God. And there were 5 things on what God would be if there was a God. And I took that piece of paper of what God wouldn't be and I crumpled it up and I threw it in the garbage. I threw away all your ideas of what God was that you had given me over the years. And I started this relationship with this sheet of paper of what God would mean to me. And I started to seek and I started to search something that was comfortable for me. I started to read different spiritual books. I started to become part of my recovery. YouTube is a fantastic way of going to going on there and saying spiritual teachers or spiritual shares, and then just picking one. And over the years, as I've done this on a daily basis, each day, I have a practice that sheet of paper with 5 things on it has become a sheet that's filled on both sides. My God has grown over the years through the steps and through continuing with the steps. And then I got to that step 3. And made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of this power that I was starting to form a relationship with. I don't move on unless I am convinced of the first requirement at the end of page 60. I must be convinced that life run on self will and can hardly be a success. It will never work. My life run by Murph has never worked. It's so funny how we never look at our track record. What does my track record look like with me in charge? Right? And so on page 62, it says, so we believe that our troubles are of our own making. And that's the greatest statement of hope in the whole big book. Because if that's true, then I don't have to wait for everything around me to change for me to be okay. The only thing that I have to do is change this, change me. And so in our lineage, we ask 3 questions. The 3 questions are, am I ready to make the decision that hereafter God will direct my life? Are you ready for that? Am I ready to make the decision that from hereafter, I will represent what God would have me be? And in our book, it says, God's will for us, we believe, is to be happy, joyous, and free, right? And so I will represent God in that way. Happiness, joy, and freedom. And am I ready to make the decision that hereafter I will trust that God will provide what I need? And if I can answer those three questions, and I make that beginning of turning my thinking and my life over to the care of this God. And what did that mean for me? That meant for the first time, and this took like 3.5, 4 months. Do you know that God is mentioned 134 times in the first 164 pages? People, this is going to seem harsh. Get over yourselves on the God thing. Ask yourself the truth. Is this really my belief system about God, or is this someone else's? Am I ready to form this relationship with what I believe God is, and that's love? And that God is going to care for me and wants me to have things in abundance, and will never make a decision in my life that isn't the best decision possible, better than anything I can ever come up with myself. Get over it. Spirit of the universe. The Christian God that you think is a bearded man in the Bible is a spirit. It's not a person. It's not a human figure. No one's ever seen God, right? Get over it. Find out the facts about it. Begin this relationship, because you're going to absolutely need it as you move further on. But I went into the 4-step this time, and guess what? I went in on God's will and not Murph's will. For the first time, I went into that 4th step unafraid. For the first time, I was thorough with that 4th step. I got to my father, and my sponsor looked me dead in the eye, and he said, Murph, how about this time? In God's will, why don't you, instead of thinking about or writing down what happened to you, what your father did to you, why not find out what happened to your father? What made your father the man that he is? Regrets come from unasked questions. I started asking questions around the family, and I found out things about my father that I never knew. During World War II, my father's job was to go into the concentration camps and get the Jewish prisoners out. And what he saw damaged him. My uncle would tell me that when he came home, he was not the same man. He was at a picnic with his first wife. She got stung by a bee in the throat. It swelled inward. She suffocated and died right in front of him. And my brother was 6 years old and witnessed his mother dying in front of him. That dream my father had of that bar, he went bankrupt on, and we lost our home. And my father was an alcoholic. I found out the facts about my father. For the first time, I had empathy for a man that I had hated my entire life. I had wasted all those years and all those thoughts, and I never knew his story. How many times does somebody come up to you and say the wrong thing to you, and you take it personally, and you don't even realize, I wonder what he's going through or she's going through today. How did she wake up this morning? It's not about me. 95% of the bad things in my life never happened. They were all in here, all in the skull, all in the brain. I learned from this 4th step not to take things personally. It's none of my business what you think of me. My business is to be of maximum service to you. The fourth column in the fourth step is one of the most important things in the entire steps. Most of us only get to the surface level action of the fourth step. I punched Joe. I yelled at my wife. I cheated on so and so, whatever the case may be, the surface level action. That's the outward reaction to a bad thought or a bad perception. We never get to the exact nature of our wrongs. What is the root cause of these things? What is the thought that precedes the anger? Where does that thought come from? I had to ask myself, my sponsor had me ask with each one of the people, where were you afraid? Where were you self-centered in this relationship? Where were you self-seeking in this relationship? And where were you dishonest in this relationship? And as I did that with every single one of those things, I saw that fear was at the forefront of everything. Because my father abandoned me, because my brother abandoned me, I had the fear that you would abandon me. I would never let you get close enough to me. I would never let a girlfriend get close enough to me. If she showed me any inkling that she was falling for me, I dropped her like a rock because I knew she was going to abandon me. At some point, she was going to leave me. And I lived my life like that. And by going through that with my father and seeing that, I got to the exact nature of why I did the things that I did. As I did that through each one of those things, and I came to realize that every single character defect that I have derives from one of those four things. 95% of the time from fear. What is fear? Well, fear is a lie. Fear is an illusion. Fear is not real. It's what I make up in my head trying to figure out the outcome of something, how something's going to turn out. Future events already ruined. My favorite acronym for fear, right? Fear is not real. And I'll give you an example. Because as I got to the sixth step, and I'm working on this thing, and I'm procrastinating on going to school. I was 50 years old at the time, and I was procrastinating on going to school for years. I wouldn't do it. And one day my sponsor said, "What's wrong with you, Murph? You're not your jovial self today." And I said, "I keep procrastinating on going to school." And he looked at me and he goes, "You think procrastination is your problem?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "What are you afraid of?" And I went, "What?" He goes, "What are you afraid of?" And we sat down and I went over my fears. One of my fears was I was afraid that I couldn't make the grades in college. I was a terrible high school student. I always got bad grades. I was just lucky enough to be a great athlete. So I got through that. But he says, "You've never been in a college class. You've never opened a college book, and you are afraid you can't make the grade." And I thought about it in a minute, and I realized that was a lie that I was telling myself. How am I going to know if I can make the grade or not if I've never been in a college class or opened a college book or taken a college test? It all made sense when it was right in front of me. But in and of myself, I couldn't see that. Self can't reveal self to self. I can't see these things within myself unless I take God with me and look for them. I was afraid I couldn't afford school. He asked me, "How much does it cost?" And I said, "I don't know." I, I didn't even know how much school cost, and I was afraid I couldn't afford school. And I went through all the fears with him. And after I was done and saw them for what they were, you see, fears are lies that we tell ourselves. So what's the only way to kill fear, to smash fear? It's with the truth. And as I saw the truth in all of these lies that I was telling myself, and I was empty of thought, this intuitive thought came to me. Ask Rob. Rob, your friend Rob, he went to school at 49 years old. So I asked Rob, and he goes, "Oh, come on over, smiley Rob. I'll help you with this." 2 days later, I was enrolled in college. Fear had kept me from it. Lies had kept me from school. It wasn't procrastination. If you're working on procrastination, you're working on the wrong thing. If you're working on anger, you're working on the wrong thing. What are the fears that cause the anger? Is it dishonesty that's causing the anger? Is it self-centeredness that's causing the anger? Is it self-seeking that's causing the anger? And you'll come to find out that the anger is just the outward reaction of a bad perception or a bad thought, a wrong thought, bad thinking, a lie. And you'll be able to get through each and every one of these. And once you become aware of the realization that step 6 and 7 are God's business and not your business, it's short in the big book because the 6 and 7 are none of my business. It doesn't say, hey, Murph, why don't you pick out the character defects for God to remove for you? It doesn't put me in any part of that except for to be willing for them to be removed. It's all God's business. And I started to realize that my job is to do whatever's in front of me. And as I do whatever's in front of me, now it's God's job to have the results. Have you ever gone to get a job? You thought you had the interview just nailed and you don't get the job? And then you're off for 6 months going, oh my God, there is no God. This is awful. I'm never going to find a job. I'm never going to do this, and waste all that energy in your own head. Right? And then 6 months down the road, you get a job and it turns out to be the greatest job you ever had in your life. And you look back and you go, oh, that's why I didn't get the job. God had the perfect result, but yet I tried to finagle my way in. I went through all that stuff, all that bad thinking, and God just had something better for me down the road. I'm running out of time, but I'll get through 9. You make all your amends, and you make every single amends you can in person. Wherever possible, you find that person and you make that amends. The amends will not turn out the way you think they will. They never do. They always turn out better. Always. I made all my amends. I get a daily reprieve contingent upon my spiritual connection. What is the reprieve from? The reprieve is from that negative thinking. I get a daily reprieve from those thoughts contingent upon how I'm connected with this power. I start to see these thoughts for what they are, and I start to turn them into positive thoughts. I pause when agitated or doubtful. I step back. I don't press send without making positively sure that I should be hitting send. Right? I can't rest on my laurels. Resting on my laurels is resting on my yesterdays. Each day is a new day that I bring God into my life. Each day is a new day that I get to have a different relationship, a different interaction with you, because you're different each day. The day yesterday, you might have been in a bad mood because of something that happened to you. If I take that personally and take that into the next day, I might not experience the joy that you have in that day, the change that you've made in yourself, the different person that you are. Step 11, on awakening, the vultures are there, and the vultures are on your bedposts, and they're looking down at you. And right when you open up your eyes, hey, let's talk about how unappreciated you are at work. Hey, let's talk about how the girlfriend disrespected you last night. Hey, let's talk about this and that. And before you can get your foot off the bed, you can be in thought and in self. I have to surrender every morning. My life run by Murph doesn't work, never has, it never will. And I ask God in. God, direct my thinking today. Let it be divorced from self-pity, the highest form of self-centeredness. Let it be divorced from anger, from resentment, from fear. Walk with me, God, through this day. I keep God in my hip pocket. I talk to God like he's my best friend. What's up, God? I might be walking down the street. What's up, God? This is going on. I need your strength, man. I need you to get me out of this. Help me with this. At night, I look back at my day. Every single night, never failing on it. before I retire at night. It may be an hour, it may be 2 hours. It's never right when I'm about to fall asleep. Where was I afraid today? Where was I self-centered today? Where was I dishonest today? Where was I self-seeking today? And I find out where that was. I write it down, I look at it, and that negative self-talk starts to disappear. I don't negatively talk to myself anymore. I start to have a new positive mind. I start to take the beautiful things in life. I start to work with other alcoholics. I'll end it with this. Working with alcoholics is the joy in my life. I never knew that true joy came from working with another person. And it doesn't just have to be an alcoholic. True joy comes from helping others outside of these rooms. AA is not about becoming a better AAer. AA is about having a happy, joyous, and free life outside of these rooms. At 51, I went to college. At 55, I jumped out of a plane. At 60, I ziplined. At 65, I bungee jumped. I don't know I'm 66 now. I don't know what life has in store for me now, right? But I do know one thing. I love Murph today. I love my life. I love everything about it. And it's because I found a God of my understanding through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have this beautiful life. I hope you can find that too. Thank you for allowing me to share it for you today.